So I'm really happy to welcome you all to this launch of the Cost Action Oceans Past platform. To many of you, the idea of a cost platform seems to indicate something like, what will it cost me? But this actually comes at no cost. It's actually funding you to do even better research in the years coming up. For the next 4 years, the EU cost funding scheme is supporting the networking of historians, archaeologists, marine scientists, modelers, statisticians, social scientists, and managers, politicians, administrators, people who have a real handle on fisheries activities, communities development in coastal societies, to come together and learn from each other, to do better research across Europe, and to make sure that we get that research in touch with the living reality of fishing industries as they develop. We have a website which is up there, and the acronym here is IS 1403, which is the actual cost action number. But what you need to remember is that this is the Oceans Past platform. The idea of the platform is to have integrated research, which means that we will come across, we will develop our research in a cross-disciplinary dialogue. So Oceans Past platform draws on the research you already are doing, especially with a focus on making available data sets of ocean goods and services, mapping of changing values and strategies of ocean harvest, to inform 2 questions: the human impact on the marine environment and the role of marine resources in human history. And we want to provide managers with indicators of change that may inform policy to increase the resilience of coastal communities by valorizing coastal heritage and promoting ocean historical literacy. It's an integrative platform, which means that it's a space for networking, methodological development, and comparative study, with the aim of lowering barriers between established science silos. We really want to break down the silos, and we want to multiply the learning outcomes of the existing research environments. We also want to evaluate and highlight best practices, learn from each other, and we want to enable transfer and co-production of knowledge among researchers and societal actors. And we want to promote marine environmental literacy. We want to understand what's happening beneath the surface, how we are impacting life under the sea surface, and how that life is fundamental to human existence, and how we depend on it and may continue to do so. We also want to use the cost action to establish European social sciences and humanities as a global leader in understanding the development and dynamics of the human ocean system. So we reach out to the outside world. We have means to ensure that we engage with global researchers across the continents. So what do we do? Well, we focus on gaining access to the historical documentation for human interaction with the marine environment, using all sorts of documents which are available to us but not readily present in our active memory because they are locked away in archives or perhaps hidden in the remnants of past human activity which need to be uncovered, need to be interpreted, and need to be brought to speak to wider issues. It's about the marine environment, from the very small, from the very productivity of the ocean to the largest living creatures of the ocean. It's also about human activities, so how we depend on the ocean. And we want to link the past and the present and the future by using information of the past and human activity to inform how the future may look like if we continue along the trajectories that we have established, and how that future look should and perhaps needs to redirect our actions and management of ocean activities. We want to introduce holistic perspectives which combine insights into the social system and the marine ecosystem. So this is truly trying to reach out and learn from each other. It's a complicated task. It's not easy, and you all know that it's not easy. Nevertheless, these complicated interrelationships are really what we need for the future to understand more about. And we will use the Oceans Past platform to raise some new questions. New questions which have up to now perhaps been less targeted by researchers such as us, and which may inform future policies. One obvious missed opportunity is understanding the gender system of the fisheries. One recent study established that 56% of the take from the sea in the Pacific Ocean was actually coming out of female labor. So clearly the role of females is critically important, and we tend to simply block our minds to those questions. We need to open our minds to the fact that the fisherman and the fisherwoman are having an impact on marine life. We also need to ask questions of sustainability, historical sustainability. We need to put on our thinking hats in many ways. It's easy to come up with broad assertions such as indigenous knowledge will be by default sustainable. We also need to understand the long-term change. One eye-opening research result was published by one of the working group leaders of the cost action, James Barrett, some 10 years ago, which established the fish event horizon in Europe. And what he did was compile the data of marine records of shellfish, fish bone from fishing settlements across northern Europe, date this bone evidence, and come up with very clear evidence that the early medieval people were basically dieting on freshwater species. In the 7th to 10th century, freshwater species, bone, are really coming up in these settlement layers, whereas by the 11th century, herringbone suddenly show up, and a little later, the more demersal species, cod, and in the 13th, 14th centuries, even deep water species such as ling, haddock, hake, and saithe are being targeted in what must have been operations that would take fishermen out to sea for several days in decked vessels. So here's really the opening of the seas for human exploitation in what we would know as the high to late Middle Ages. That establishes a baseline for human interaction in Northern Europe. Obviously, in Southern Europe, we had already been targeting marine species way past that date. Even the Greeks and the Romans in classical times, we know now, fed extensively on the supplies of the Black Sea and the Western Mediterranean. Danish and German parts of the Wadden Sea area, basically these oyster beds were fished out quite early on in the late 18th century for the southern part, and for the northern part a little later in the 19th century. We are also asking questions about human settlements and communities. We know now that the human settlements responded directly to the opportunities of marine harvests, and also responded to drivers such as climate change and market responses. These changes could be quite dramatic, and certainly in some cases led to dramatic shifts in settlement patterns, changes which are still with us today, which really are the explanatory factors behind how and why we live where we do along the European coasts. That, of course, is an interesting question in itself, but it should also inform how we deal with the heritage, the cultural capital of these sites, how we bring them into our future, how we deal with the cultural capital which has been inherited from past generations and which will inform us about how maritime communities have constantly been challenged by the surrounding resource opportunities. And finally, we need to ask questions about food security and ocean literacy. Food security is all about making sure that in 20, 30 years' time, there will still be an opportunity for us to have marine protein. We know that in the next 25 years, the human population will grow. There is no more fishery opportunity in the world's oceans at large. We have harvested to the full, to the max. And therefore, by simple projection of those two facts, we know that what we consider now as easy, fairly cheap food, which is of high nourishing quality, will become much less available. Total global per capita consumption will decrease by almost half over the next 25 years of wildlife catches. That's a stark reality, and of course raises real questions about, will we be able to supplement by using marine aquaculture? We all know that there are enormous challenges to that possible prospect, both in terms of environmental and social consequences, and this is something that the Oceans Pass platform will deal with. And in a wider context, we also need to increase awareness of the consequences of our actions when we put our food on the table, when we decide from the menu, when we go to the supermarket. We all make choices, individual choices which matter. And we may not, in lively conversation, want to think too much about how we have sourced the food that we get. But a recent study indicated that the average American plate would have been sourced from resources which would on average have traveled 1,500 miles to end on your plate. That, of course, indicates enormous consequences of global transportation. It means food has become easily available, but it also means that the North is tapping into the rich biodiversity of the South, and we are depriving people in parts of the globe of the marine protein that they might have wanted, but which they cannot any longer afford. So there are real questions of food literacy which need to be addressed as we progress our work in the coming years. We will be using this website as a first port of call for the work that we will be doing. But as we move along, there will be an increased use of social media. We will want to reach out in many different ways. But let me sum up what it is we try to do with the Oceans Past platform. Really, the focus of what we do is coming out of a human and social perspective on the fishing community, but we want to make sure that we understand the ecological foundations of and implications of human activity. We want to understand how heritage settlements, both material and immaterial legacies, may both inform us of the past and may enrich our future. And we need to understand the gender and value systems which guide our directions and inform our choices. So how do we do this in practical terms? We have established 5 working groups. First working group looks at trends in production and consumption. The second looks into coastal settlements. The third one into changing values, economic and cultural, of marine life to society. A fifth one looks at the gendered seas, the roles of men and women for the interaction with the sea. And a third one, 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, aquaculture, really informing us of what are the implications for future sustainability of human nourishment. In order to do this, we also need some management. Our management system is set up to really make sure that we have a good flow of information. And the information flows that we need to manage first needs to make sure that we have a good overall targeting of the right questions and that we are sourcing the right kind of information. Therefore, we are establishing a sounding board which will consist of both researchers and managers to make sure that the two groups meet. We will also have communicators, people from museums, archives, and media people to make sure that we really encompass the full breadth of the information sources and information channels. We have established a small synthesis group which will select from all of that wide diversity of information the right ways in which we can channel the information and also make sure that the research questions are highlighted and the working groups are really targeting these questions. Out of the work will come 2 very different types of research information, research advice. One will inform us of marine goods and services, mostly quantitative. And we will also have another flow of information which will much more look into the qualitative information of perceptions of marine resource use. Both of these streams are critically important for us as we go forward. We cannot select just one over the other. We need both the numbers and the values in order to make good impact. They will be channeled through back to the managers and the policy actors through 2 types of information. One will be quantitative indicators and one will be qualitative trajectories or narratives. We have, therefore, a wide range of interested parties in addition to the researchers which are called on to interact with the Oceans Past platform. Managers such as ICES, HELCOM and English Heritage have signed up to the Oceans Past platform and will probably, but we may stand corrected, probably primarily request information such as indicators. Others, such as the International Council of Maritime Museums, broadcasters and communicators will probably request more in the terms of trajectories. And in between will also be the communities that we want to engage with directly and the people who communicate to school children, who really reach out to many different interested parties, will probably want to tap into both types of information. We also need to get the message out there to the broader public, so we need to make sure that we reach out to the academic community, of course. We have established the PLOS One HMAP collection. We will build on that already established academic outlet and make sure that there will be even more academic output in the future. And therefore we are funding academic papers to be published through this channel. And we will also look into developing other types of media outlets, less academic, but no less impactful, perhaps. We want to support and strengthen awareness within the Oceans Past community itself. In order to learn from best practices in a wide community, it's really important that we learn how other people are doing stuff. And therefore we will have short video presentations to highlight selected research projects to explain the background, process and goals of individual researchers and highlight how people work across disciplinary boundaries. We will motivate discussions between managers, politicians and researchers by also producing high quality film which will describe findings and highlight transdisciplinary collaborations. And we will also try to document important workshop discussions in film production to make them available for online viewing. The broader public as well will want to have access to high quality documentaries to really tap into the Oceans Past platform. All of this will be overseen by a management committee. And it's one of the fortunes of Europe, of course, that we have a diversity of cultural richness and national perspectives. It's also one of the curses. 24 European countries have signed up to the Oceans Past platform. Each nation appoints 2 committee members. So at the present we have 48 committee members meeting in the management committee to oversee that we are doing what we set out to do. Obviously 48 people is quite a monstrous beast to for any kind of coordination. Therefore there is some structure to it. There's a chair which I'm proud to sit on, and we have a vice chair who is Dr. Hen Oyavir of Estonia. He also chairs the synthesis group. We have an incoming chair of the sounding board, and we will have lead partners in charge of each of the working groups. The working groups are really where all the action is taking place. To support all of this, we have a platform manager, a facilitator who is charged with making sure that we keep track of all that's going on. and that we meet our financial objectives. So what do we fund? We fund meetings primarily. Obviously, the management committee itself needs funding to meet, but more importantly, the working groups need funding. We need to bring all of you together. Therefore, we will try to make economies. We will have the management committee meet in conjunction with working group meetings so that we don't fund people just for management meetings, but really make sure that people come also to do content. We fund conferences and we fund, very importantly, training schools. Going forward, we will want to have 1 or 2 training schools a year. This year we will not have a training school because we are only starting now, but we will definitely want you to all think about what are really the needs for my PhD students, my postdocs, how might I myself really want to learn from what other people do. And we have the money to bring in the best teachers from anywhere in the world to work with you to make sure that a training school is successful. In addition, we fund STSMs, which are short-term scientific missions. These are research activities which focus on a single question or a single objective or a learning objective which can be accomplished within the span of 1 to 3 months. It will fund you not with the full amount you need to bring your own salary, but we will pay for the extra costs of obviously transportation and accommodation and provide you with a per diem rate so that you can actually visit an institution in another country and bring back information from that country. There are no restrictions on this, so you can go either within Europe or to any other part of the globe. But I look forward to working with you in the Oceans Past platform. Thank you.